Please, just stand in the back, Pops. It's protocol. The graduates need the aisle clear." David whispered the lie through gritted teeth, his face burning with a mixture of anxiety and shame. He adjusted the pristine white high collar of his dress uniform, the gold buttons gleaming under the bright Maryland sun. Beside him stood his grandfather, Arthur. Arthur was 78, stooped at the shoulders, wearing a charcoal suit that had gone out of style 3 decades ago. The fabric was shiny at the elbows from years of wear. The cuffs were slightly frayed, and the lapels were too wide. It smelled faintly of mothballs and stale tobacco. Amidst the sea of crisp white naval uniforms, designer dresses of proud mothers, and the tailored Italian suits of wealthy fathers, Arthur looked like a stain on a perfect painting. David, a newly minted ensign about to graduate from the United States Naval Academy, felt the eyes of his peers on him. He saw the subtle snurs, the whispered jokes. "Is that the gardener?" someone had muttered earlier. David loved his grandfather. The man had raised him since his parents died. But today, here in the cathedral of military elitism, David just wanted to fit in. He wanted the perfect image, and Arthur's worn-out shoes and bargain bin tie were ruining it. "I'll be fine right here, Davy," Arthur said, his voice raspy but gentle. He patted David's arm with a hand that was missing the tip of the ring finger. "You go stand with your class. You look sharp, real sharp." Arthur didn't seem to notice the stares. Or maybe he just didn't care. But David cared. If you've ever regretted being ashamed of someone who loved you, type "family" in the comments right now. Because today, the most expensive suit in the crowd was about to get outshined by the one that cost the most to wear. The air at Annapolis was electric, charged with the weight of tradition and the humidity of late May. The Naval Academy graduation is not just a ceremony. It is a coronation. The president was sometimes there. Today, it was the chief of naval operations, Admiral Vance. Admiral Vance was a legend, a myth. They called him the Iron Hull. He had served in Vietnam, the Cold War, Desert Storm. He was the kind of officer every cadet prayed to become and feared to disappoint. The stadium was packed. The midshipmen stood in rigid formation, a grid of white and gold. David stood in the 3rd row, his spine stiff, his eyes locked forward. But his mind was drifting back to the parking lot. He had walked fast, leaving Arthur to catch up, hoping no one would associate the two of them. He had introduced Arthur to his roommate, Brad, with a mumbled, "This is my grandfather," before quickly turning the conversation to the ceremony schedule. Brad, whose father was a senator, had given Arthur a polite, condescending nod, the kind you give to hired help. The shame was a cold stone in David's stomach. He felt like a traitor, but he also felt the crushing pressure of social expectation. He had spent 4 years trying to prove he belonged here, that the kid from the Rust Belt could stand toe-to-toe with the dynasties of the Navy. Arthur's suit was a billboard advertising his poverty. "Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Marcus Vance," the announcer's voice boomed over the PA system. The crowd erupted. Thousands stood. David snapped a salute as the Admiral walked onto the stage. Vance looked like he was carved from oak. His uniform was immaculate, a wall of ribbons on his chest. He moved with a predatory grace, despite his age. He gave a speech about honor, about sacrifice, about the unseen threads that bind the fleet together. David listened, but he was distracted. He could see Arthur out of the corner of his eye, standing near the concession stands because the ushers had moved him away from the VIP family section, where he didn't have the right ticket. Arthur was straining on his tiptoes to see, smiling, waving a small American flag he had brought from home. A group of parents near Arthur were edging away from him, giving him side-eye. David closed his eyes for a second. "Just let this be over," he prayed. "Let me get my commission and get him out of here." After the speeches, The ceremony broke formation for the inspection of the line, a tradition where the Admiral walks past the new graduates, shaking hands, offering a personal word to the top of the class. It was a moment of high tension. The Admiral descended the stairs. He walked down the aisle, flanked by his aides and security. He stopped to speak to Brad. "Senator's son, correct?" "Good work," Vance said. Brad beamed. "Thank you, Admiral." The Admiral moved down the line. He was getting closer to David. David held his breath. He rehearsed his greeting. "Good afternoon, Admiral. Ensign Miller reporting." He needed to be perfect. He needed to show that he was officer material. The Admiral reached David. He paused. He looked at David's name tag. "Miller?" the Admiral asked. "Yes, sir. Ensign David Miller, sir." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. He seemed to be searching David's face, looking for a ghost. "Miller," he repeated. "Are you related to an Arthur Miller? From Detroit?" David froze. The blood drained from his face. He hesitated. Was this it? Was the Admiral going to ask why his grandfather was dressed like a vagrant? Was he going to reprimand him for the poor appearance of his guest? "Yes, sir," David whispered, his voice cracking. He is my grandfather. He's here today." "He is?" The Admiral's head snapped up. "Where?" David swallowed hard. He pointed vaguely toward the back, toward the concession stands, toward the shadows where he had hoped Arthur would stay hidden. "Back there, sir. I can ask him to wait outside if—" But the Admiral was already moving. He didn't walk. He marched. He broke protocol. He left the line of graduates. The aides looked confused. The security detail scrambled to keep up. The crowd murmured. What was happening? Was there a security threat? Admiral Vance marched straight past the senators, past the wealthy donors, past the mothers in their pearls. He marched straight toward the man in the frayed charcoal suit. Arthur saw the Admiral coming. He looked confused. He looked around to see who was behind him, thinking he was in the way. He started to shuffle backward, clutching his little flag, looking down at his scuffed shoes. He was used to moving out of the way of important men. "Chief!" the Admiral barked. The voice wasn't the polite tone of a graduation speech. It was the raw, commanding shout of a ship's captain. Arthur froze. His head snapped up. His back straightened. The stoop in his shoulders vanished instantly. Old muscle memory took over. Admiral Vance stopped 3 feet from Arthur. The entire stadium had gone silent. The cameras zoomed in. The giant screens showed the image. The most powerful man in the Navy, gleaming in gold and white, standing in front of a shrunken old man in a suit that looked like it had been bought at a thrift store. Then the impossible happened. Admiral Vance, the Chief of Naval Operations, snapped his heels together. He raised his right hand. He rendered a slow, crisp, perfect hand salute. He held it. He didn't drop it. Arthur's chin quivered. His watery eyes widened behind his thick glasses. Slowly, trembling, he raised his hand. His fingers were crooked, the missing tip of his ring finger clearly visible. He returned the salute. It wasn't the salute of a civilian. It was the salute of a man who had done it 10,000 times. "Permission to embrace, Chief?" the Admiral asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Permission granted, sir," Arthur whispered. Vance dropped the salute and grabbed Arthur, pulling the frail old man into a hug that looked like it could crush him. The Admiral buried his face in the shoulder of that mothball-scented suit. "I thought you were dead," Vance said, loud enough for the nearby microphones to catch. "For 40 years, I thought you went down with the ship." "I'm hard to kill, sir," Arthur chuckled, patting the Admiral's back. Vance pulled back, keeping his hands on Arthur's shoulders. He turned to the crowd. He turned to the graduates. He turned to David, who had followed, his mouth agape, his world spinning. "Do you know who this man is?" Vance shouted, his voice echoing off the stadium walls. He looked at the sneering parents. He looked at the arrogant cadets. You see an old man in a cheap suit. I see a giant. Vance pointed at Arthur's hands. You see that missing finger? He lost that closing a steam valve in a burning boiler room on the USS Forrestal. 1967. I was an ensign, green, scared. The fire suppression system failed. The flames were eating the bulkheads. Everyone was running up the ladder. I was trapped behind a debris wall. I was burning. I was screaming. The silence in the stadium was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Chief Miller, Vance continued, tears freely running down his iron face, didn't run up. He ran down. He came back into the fire. He grabbed the valve with his bare hands. It was glowing red hot. He cranked it shut to cut the fuel line. He burned his hands to the bone. He lost his finger. And then he carried me, up 3 decks of ladders while the skin was melting off his back. Vance looked at David. Your grandfather spent 6 months in a burn ward. He was medically discharged. He never made officer. He never got the big pension. He worked in a factory for 30 years with hands that never stopped hurting. The Admiral stepped closer to David, his eyes blazing. You were standing there, worried about the cut of his suit? Son, that suit is a uniform of honor, greater than anything you or I will ever wear. He wears that suit because he spent every dime he had, making sure you could stand here today in that white uniform. David felt as if he had been punched in the chest. The air left his lungs. He looked at his grandfather. Really looked at him. He didn't see the frayed cuffs anymore. He saw the burn scars on the neck that he had always ignored. He saw the missing finger. He saw the sacrifice. The shabby clothes weren't a sign of failure. They were the battle scars of love. They were the evidence of a life given wholly to others. Tears welled in David's eyes. The shame he had felt earlier rushed back, but now it was shame at himself. He had judged the book by its cover, and the book was a masterpiece he hadn't bothered to read. David stepped forward. He bypassed the Admiral. He dropped to his knees in front of Arthur, right there in the dirt of the stadium field, in his pristine whites. He didn't care about the grass stains. "Pops," David choked out. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Arthur looked down, confused. "Get up, Davy. You'll stain your knees." "No," David said, grabbing Arthur's scarred hand and pressing it to his forehead. "I don't care about the uniform. I care about you. I was ashamed. And I'm the one who should be ashamed. You're the hero, not me, not the Admiral. You." Arthur smiled, that soft, crinkly smile. "You're my grandson, Davy. That's the only rank I care about." Admiral Vance placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Get up, Ensign. Stand with your grandfather." David stood. He put his arm around Arthur's shoulder. He pulled him close, not hiding him, but holding him up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Vance turned back to the microphone, "I'm changing the protocol. The reviewing stand is for dignitaries. Today, I have only one dignitary." He gestured to the VIP platform where the senators and generals sat. "Chief Miller, if you would do me the honor of sitting next to me for the review." The crowd exploded. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. It started with the midshipmen who threw their hats in the air, then the parents, then the officers. Standing ovation that rolled like thunder across the field. Arthur Miller, the man in the worn-out charcoal suit, walked up the stairs to the VIP platform, escorted by the Chief of Naval Operations. As he passed the section where the wealthy parents had sneered at him, they stood up, they clapped. Some of them looked down, ashamed of their own judgment. David watched him go. He stood taller than he ever had in his life. Brad, his roommate, walked up to him. Brad looked humbled. "Your grandfather saved the Admiral?" Brad asked, his voice quiet. "Yeah," David said, wiping his eyes. "He did." "Man," Brad said, looking at his own father in the expensive suit, then up at Arthur. "My dad just writes checks. Your grandpa, he's the real deal?" The ceremony continued, but the dynamic had shifted. The focal point wasn't the gold braid or the shiny swords. It was the old man in the bad suit sitting at the right hand of power. When the ceremony ended, Arthur didn't leave through the back gate. He was mobbed. Cadets wanted to shake his hand. Officers wanted a photo. Admiral Vance refused to leave his side. That evening, at the graduation dinner, David didn't take Arthur to the back corner of a quiet restaurant. He walked him into the officers' club. He held his head high. When they walked in, the room went quiet. Then, slowly, the clapping started again. The lesson David learned that day is one we all need to remember. We live in a world of filters and facades. We judge people by the brand of their shoes, the cut of their hair, and the car they drive. We forget that the most valuable things in life often come in plain wrapping. We forget that the people who built the world we enjoy often have dirt under their fingernails and clothes that have seen better days. Arthur's suit was worn out because he had used up his resources raising a good man. His hands were scarred because he had used them to save a life. His silence was not weakness. It was the quiet confidence of a man who knows what he has done and needs no applause. The Admiral's salute wasn't just for a saved life. It was a reminder that rank is what you wear, but respect is what you earn. There is no rank higher than hero, and heroes don't always wear capes or medals. Sometimes they wear old charcoal suits that smell like mothballs. So, the next time you see an elderly person struggling with a grocery cart, or sitting alone on a park bench in worn-out clothes, don't look away. Don't judge. You don't know who they are. You don't know the fires they've walked through. That quiet old man might be the reason you have the freedom to stand there and judge him. That shabby woman might have sacrificed her own dreams so her children could have yours. Appearances are a lie. Character is the truth. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that we should honor the sacrifices of the past generation, regardless of what they look like today, then I have a favor to ask. Subscribe to this channel. Join our community. We are building a place where honor, respect, and history are kept alive. Share this video with your friends, your family, and especially with the young people in your life. Teach them to look past the suit and see the soul. Because one day, the glitter will fade, the uniforms will be hung up, and all that will remain is what we did for others. Let's bring back the respect, let's bring back the honor, and let's never, ever forget the giants upon whose shoulders we stand. Thank you for watching. Salute the old guard.